Hello there, German learners. Michael here from SmarterGerman, and today I have the honor to speak to David Steele, man of steel, and founder of Story Planet, a very beautiful app that helps you to learn German with tiny little stories. And of course, there is a lot more to it. But David, would you do me the honor and introduce yourself quickly, and then let's have a little conversation about how you learn German, what advice you can give to people, and of course, what Story Planet is and how it evolved. Yeah.
Well, I'm David Steele. I was born in the United States, grew up in New Mexico mostly, and I came to Switzerland in an exchange year and just kind of got stuck here. I did go back to the US and study. Anyway, it's a very long story, but at some point about 5 years ago, I was sitting down with a friend of mine who's a programmer, and I've been teaching English, and I've been writing, mostly writing now. And the idea was, how can we, use technology to help the reading experience for people who are learning a foreign language? And that was kind of the beginning of Story Planet, right there. And I was starting to read digitally. So if you read in an app or with a Kindle or something, you can just kind of click on words and get definitions. And that was just like, oh, wow. What if I was doing this in a foreign language? Can I then make my own learning list? Can I then do exercises so I can practice it and really learn those words in that context? And just the words that are relevant to me. That's the big thing too. Because as you're learning, or as you get to a certain level, I think, you get quickly bored with out-of-the-box apps because they force you to learn a certain thing. You're like, I know that already. You really want the individualized approach.
So you jumped right into it. We will talk a bit more about your person later on when we go to your very personal German learning story. But I instantly have a question when I hear this, because you mentioned Kindle, and Kindle allows you to look up words, and they even have a vocabulary book or notebook function. So how is Story Planet different from that?
Well, in the beginning, we really wanted to integrate our technology in something like a Kindle or iBooks. iBooks are slightly more accessible technology-wise, but we failed because they won't let you, basically. I mean, iBooks don't let you have a plugin, and Kindle for sure not. So that's when we said, okay, we're just going to make a standalone app, because Apple and Google, they want apps in there, and then we can create our own ecosystem, so to speak. Because there's definitely certain things that those reading devices can't do because they're not designed for learners. Some of them do have audio, not all of them. But if you make a personalized list, what do you do then? Can you actually do exercise with it? And at least the access we were allowed to these technologies, we couldn't save the information. You couldn't store the information. So obviously, as a learner, you want to have your progress documented. And you want to say, okay, I did that correctly. So then the next time you don't have to do it again. And those are the kinds of things that weren't possible.
I understand.
Still are not possible. So.
Yeah, I also find, well, it's useful if I read English books and look up an occasional word, right? But I'm fluent in English, so it's not too many of them. But you have to look up 5 words per page, and it's very slow. At least I have an old Kindle, not the Fire thingy. Yeah. So it's very clunky, if you ask me. It's a lovely tool. I love my Kindle, but not for learning any language. So how does Story Planet work? What's the principle? Like, if I open the app, what happens there? How do I learn with Story Planet?
Well, it's been a long journey, but one of the first parts of the journey was we started a WhatsApp broadcast. So every day someone would get like a little message, which was part of a story. And that was really successful. People really liked that. So every day they got a part of a story. We do this in German and in English, by the way, since the beginning. And these WhatsApp groups just got bigger and bigger. We had to create parallel groups because they max out at a certain point. But we knew that WhatsApp was going to change their policies and not allow this anymore. So we had to quickly create the app. But this idea of a daily broadcast really stuck with us. It wasn't part of our original idea, but definitely the first thing you'll notice when you get Story Planet is there's a new chapter every day for free. So if you get the version, you always have it'll build up Monday to Friday. You get the whole story will be finished. It's a mini story, and the new story will start the next week. Now, if you're in the free version, you only can read that week's story or maybe 2 or 3 weeks back, but then not the other ones. So when you pay, then you get access to more stories. And now there's about 100 stories in there, all different kinds of genres, different levels too. And of course, the learning functions, the ability to have your learning list and those things.
Yeah, so just to summarize, from my point of view, you have a text on your phone or whatever you use it on, and then you can tap on a word, you get the translation.
No, not the translation. We offer definitions.
Oh, you have that's more accurate. Yeah, definitions means it's in German only at this point, but we discussed this already. So if it's German, I would say it's earliest A2 level, B1 level that you actually will really benefit from it, but you can give it a try even before. But that's why we're talking as well, right? Because I would love to see this in English, but you have your reasons to do so. We discuss it in length, and it's not interesting here.
Well, I think when you have to have interesting stories, I mean, you can have interesting stories with very, very few words and very simple grammar, but normally you need a certain level of, let's say, 1,000 words base vocabulary, which you will have by the end of A1, beginning of A2. In America, we call that novice and intermediate. So you'd be at an intermediate low level. You can actually start with the stories. And then, you might have to look up all the words we have highlighted, which are all the words A2 and above. And if you're B1, you can still read the story. Like if you're at intermediate high or even advanced, you'll still appreciate the stories because there's so many of those words you don't know. And maybe it won't be every second word, but 2 or 3 words every chapter. And you can add those to your learning list and just build your vocabulary that way in a very playful way and always in the right context, which in German is so important.
Well, in any language, if you ask me, but
I think it more in German because we're annotating German and English stories, and English has other things that make it difficult. But there are a lot of words in German, like ja, that has like 50 different meanings. I mean, literally, you don't.
That's very easy. Simply ignore it.
No, it's interesting though because I mean, one of my first jobs in Switzerland where I was working was doing a film projector. You have to kind of put the film in those days. Now it's all digital, and the guy would tell me, don't put it through here. He says, ja, nicht das machen.
Also, yeah, beautiful.
Ja, nicht das machen. I'm like, yes, no. Like, what should I do? Should I do it or should I shouldn't? So like, ja does not mean ja there. It means definitely don't do it.
Yeah, but if you ignore it, don't do it. Good enough whether you should by all means not do it.
Ignore ja in general.
Yeah, because these are things that become interesting in B2 level. Yeah, these are modal particles and they're lovely. Exactly. But as a beginner, by all means, ignore that. But it's fine but solving this with software, that's a pain in the neck. I totally understand where you come from. Yeah.
But it's nice to then be able to look up the real meaning of that word in that context and understand, okay, it's not yes here, but it means, definitely, it's just enforcing that nicht or gerade, as an example.
Yeah, I have the same.
Straight, or you're doing something right now. Yes.
Yeah. There's many of those, mal, wohl, they're omnipresent. And in my experience in other languages, they really fall into place as you advance. You don't really cognitively get that right away. Yeah, you need a lot of knowledge and context before it actually drops. But it's lovely to have natural text in the beginning. Yeah, so no doubt.
Yeah, and I think that the natural text, I mean, I read a lot in German. And I think by doing that, you do pick up a feeling for those words. Because again, you can't really understand it. But I think if I had this technology when I was learning German, it would have been faster because then I would have at least understood what it is instead of just forgetting about it. And then because the flow only comes through lots and lots of content. And then you start to realize, okay, der hat wohl gar nicht alle, or something like this, like these sort of interesting uses of wohl or alle or whatever, and then you can kind of create those sentences naturally.
I totally agree. The one thing that came to mind, because we met because you have a tool that helps me evaluate the text, whether it's A1, A2, B1, B2. What would you say is the difference between these levels? So between A1, A2, B1, B2, like in a short way, please. Yeah. So what's the difference between A1 and A2, for example, for you?
A1 and A2.
Hmm.
Well, normally in A1, you're just learning the basics.
Which is?
It's like my name is, and I like to order the pizza, you know, and just stuff like that. And you build up a very basic vocabulary, which is important. You need that. And you learn certain grammar, but there's not a lot of grammar, I think. Yeah, and you just want to use the language and have your moments of success with it. You know, it's like, hey, I actually had a conversation in German. A2 is when you start to, you know, fill in the dots and fill in the blanks. You know, you start to, like, you know, sentence structure, and you build your vocabulary exponentially, I think, with A2. It really takes off with B1 and B2. So it's just, it is, on the one hand, it is just the mass of vocabulary, but you can't fit all that vocabulary in your mind if it doesn't make sense. So having the basis kind of lays the groundwork. I'm not sure exactly, but there are, I think A1, it's like 1,000 or 2,000 words. You know?
I would stick to 800 to 1,000.
Okay.
Not that you can really count it. So the question would be, what makes a word A1, right? House, of course, is A1 because everybody, it's close to English and you see it and you know what it is. And if I say building, then that's possibly B1 because it has nothing to do with, well, building literally in German means Gebäude is something, a conglomeration of things that have been built. Yeah, which is a house in the house is a building. Yeah?
I can look in our tool, but we have those lists anyway. So there's definitely vocabulary, and these have been created over many, many years by different publishers and Goethe Institute and stuff like that. And we're using these lists, of course, to make the analysis. Yeah,
but one thing you have to keep in mind with these lists, these are highly hypothetical. Yeah, they're also based on written German. That's the main criticism on these frequency lists. Yeah, there is some truth to it, and I totally like the approach. Yeah,
there is a difference between frequency lists and the Goethe Institute
and the A1 lists even. Oh, sorry. Yes, yes. So, sorry for being.
And we use both. We use both.
But even those lists is the same principle. It's who says it's A1? Is there a magic German guy in the cellar and says this is A1? This is
when
A2?
Goethe Institute says it's B1. Then that's on their test. So it is relevant in the sense that Goethe Institute is defining what B1 is at that moment, because if you want that level test, then those are the words you have to know.
So what is,
insofar as those are the words, the frequency we use as a backup though, because new words are coming up all the time, or there's words that, you know, Goethe Institute didn't think about. I mean, I had it recently, I forgot what it was. It's really simple words sometimes. And then we will use the frequency lists to kind of place it where it is, like how common is this word. So
so what you're basically saying is it's completely made up by the Goethe Institute to lure you into their exams, right?
Of course.
Good. Just that we're clear. It's a complete.
Wait, am I going to be quoted on this?
No. It's I said that you just confirmed.
Okay. I must add though that it's for German. You do have the Österreichische Sprachdiplom is also involved in creating these lists. And they do ask the Swiss as well. So there's those Swiss, three countries are all involved, and there's a very, very long bureaucratic process. Yeah. And we had the honor of being able to use these lists. I mean, we had to extract them out of PDFs and digitalize them in a meaningful way. But yeah, so.
Beautiful. Someone had to hack in thousands of words manually, huh?
Yeah, you can extract them.
Yeah, well, lucky to hear that. Happy to hear that. Yeah, but that's interesting. So yeah, let's stay there with that topic. You learned German yourself, and you said you read a lot, which is what, by the way, many people, many tutors, polyglots actually recommend. Read as much as you can. Many questions I get when I say that, of course I also say that, is, okay, what shall I read? And what would you answer to that question? As a beginner, let's say I'm beginning to learn German, what shall I read in the beginning?
Well, I can say what I read, and the first story I read was Momo by Michel Ende. I mean, the first book, like, you know, real book. And that was really hard. I think I spent a week on the first page. You know? So there's
a whole week on the first page. The funny thing is, isn't it about time?
It's a lovely story.
It's about wasting time, right? So it's
yeah.
a whole week on the first page is so it's beautiful. You
It
understood
was.
the book right away.
I slowed time down. I mean, there were things in there like, you know, die Marktbeschicker haben ihre Produkte auf dem Markt feilgeboten.
Oh, wow.
Like feilgeboten. I literally asked a German person, they said it's like a feilbogen. I'm like, no, it's a very specific term to, you know, when you're on a market and you're, I didn't even know the English word, but you're like trying to sell your terms. It's kind of almost like a slang word.
To offer, yeah.
So, you know, many people will say read children's books. I'm not convinced, because I think children's books tend to be often written in very poetic or in past tense, in kind of artificial language, and they're also not long enough. So what I found is reading maybe young adult literature, because that will be written a bit easier. That won't be too literary. You just need to find a genre that you like. So, and I think that's what's important. It's something that interests you. Or, and I did this too, I read a book that I loved, like The Hobbit, in German. So I kind of knew it already. But, you know, I just had the pleasure again of reading it again and really falling in love with the words, because if you're reading it as a native speaker, you don't think about the fact that you're reading. But if you're reading in a foreign language, you really look at every word more consciously. And Tolkien was a fantastic writer. And his translators were also good, at least.
Yeah, I totally agree. I read it also in both languages, and it was one of my first English books that I read, funny enough.
Okay, and it's, you know, he's not so literary in the sense that the words are relevant, and it doesn't get too, you can follow what he's talking about, but it's very beautifully written. And newspapers, of course, magazines, you know, I think that's really key. But I think it's most important, it's something that interests you. And that's why in Story Planet, we really make an effort to have a good cross-section of genres. We have our love stories in there. We have our adventure stories in there. We have science fiction. We have just factual stories about famous people, you know, just kind of covering all the different bases.
But your stories are short stories, right? That's important.
Very, very short, yeah.
Yeah. Why did you decide to go for very short? What's the logic behind it? Because you just quoted, you know, children's books are too short, right? You should possibly aim for Harry Potter, eight tomes of stuff. Yeah.
Well, it's snackable content. You know, it's just kind of, that's our age. People are just used to reading quick, short things. You know, newspaper articles have gotten shorter. Still, they're not so short. You know, I mean, there's still, people will read something, but if it's a foreign language, you already have this thing like, you know, how long do I have to read until it becomes interesting, or until I reach the end, or, you know what I mean? So we just keep this snackable content. So coming every day. And if you do decide to, if you get the subscription, you're looking at old stories, you'll always know it's going to be a quick read. You'll get through a story. You know, if you're really, really beginning, maybe you'll take an hour to read a whole story, but max.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, so it's snackable content. We will be integrating longer content in there over time. But I do think there comes this point when you're ready to read longer content, you know, then you're pushing B1, B2, and then you won't necessarily need the app anymore. Then you can just take any book.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also nice to have a little success experience after a short time, right? And it's kind of, it's so beautiful. Even if you read a book in your mother tongue, then you finish it. It's such a beautiful moment. Yeah, it's nothing. Nothing compares to that. Watching a movie for 3 hours. Yeah, let's watch the Avengers, and it's like after 3 hours you feel rather worse than before. So I rather read the book, although I wouldn't touch that. It's a 10-foot pole, but it's yeah. So I totally agree. It's such a beautiful and rare emotional experience to finish a story or a book. Story can give a little glimpse of that feeling, but after reading Lord of the Rings, I was just like, oh, it's over. So
that's the other thing, is you don't want it to be over. I mean, but I think what's really good about our short stories too, or about reading in general, is that you go at your own pace. Because we had played with the idea of films, you know, stuff like that. If you stop a film every 2 seconds to look up a word, it destroys the experience. Whereas reading is that space where you're taking your time and you read however fast or slow you want to. So it's really kind of a quiet space where no one's pressuring you. You know, there's no one, you know, there's not this thing going. It's like, oh wait, what did he say? You know, you can really dive into it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And reading is actually less linear than it seems, because you always perceive words around the words you read. And I can skim a text first. Sorry, my computer is shaking. I can skim a text quickly and just go through. I don't have to look up a single word just to get an idea. I cannot do that with a movie, where I could fast forward through a movie, but first of all, that takes ages, and then it's also no joy. Why would you want to do that? You take the attention away. But with reading a book in a foreign language, you could do that without necessarily find out what's happening. But so I always tell people to prepare first, to first read and just get a glimpse of what this is about. And then you fill the gaps, which is like a puzzle. I don't know how you puzzle, but I put the frame first. There's different approaches. And then I look at pieces that fit together. And then in the end, I have the whole picture. So it's a puzzle. Reading a story, or learning a language is puzzling.
That's a really, really, really good point, Michelle. And let me dive into that, because when I read Momo, like I said, I spent 1 week on the first page. Like at some point, you have to let go. You cannot look up every single word. And so, but you know, so then I reached that point. I would just keep reading, and I just read and read and read. But then I would see a word, you know, again and again, and I'd be like, okay, I want to know what that word means, you know.
Yes.
So then you find this balance between how much you look up and how much you just kind of go with it, because there will always be words you don't understand. So you need to find a balance. And what I like about, you know, the Story Planet, or even with digital reading in general, is that it's almost like you're not disturbing the flow. You can really stay in the flow of the story and look up. But then the satisfaction of the flow of reading comes more and more as you don't look up everything and you resist that temptation. So it's a balance.
Yeah, and that's a process I also teach in my course. It's really, you have to resist the urge to want to understand every single word.
Yeah,
some people struggle with it because the mind is the mind, but you can learn it. Yeah,
I think especially as we get older, it gets more difficult to learn a foreign language, because we do have this feeling that I want to understand. I want to kind of pin this down, and you have to really be able to let go. But that's good for the mind. And good in general, personal advice to someone: just kind of let things go, and then you're actually more open to absorb things.
I never thought of that. When I think of why it feels different to learn a language at let's say our age, you're possibly a bit younger. I forgot. You don't have to disclaim that here. Let them. Yeah. Let's say I reached the second half of my existence here, but so my main problem with learning new things is, am I really interested enough? Do I have a need for this? Yeah, learning a language just for the fun of it, if it comes to you, fine. But I actually have other things I prefer to do with my free time. Not that they are better than learning a language. I don't think there is many things that are better than that. But I simply have different preferences. Yeah, and it must make some sort of sense. And even if that sense is having joy in doing so. So I wouldn't learn Esperanto just because I got the time, and because I wouldn't know what for. Yeah, except for the moment at this. But I know it doesn't rock my boat. Funny enough, yeah, I've been studying 15 languages over the last 20 years, yeah, on and off, and only to a very basic level, of course. By far no polyglot.
I mean, but, I think the reason you go, I mean, there are some people who just want to learn all those languages, and that's enough motivation for them.
Yeah, beautiful. I envy those, by the way. Yeah.
I mean, I think in my case, or in the case of the people who read Story Planet, besides obviously, let's say kids or people who are just in a class who are under 20 or mid 20, like university, they need to learn it because they need to have an exam or whatever. Another large group of people are people like me who are just happen to end up living in a different country or marrying a person from a different culture. And I think that adds a big motivation. And some people don't follow up on that. It's not enough. For me, it's been extremely important to be able to communicate with my in-laws. It adds so much to any relationship. Yeah, and then I think also, I mean, for you, Michael, you grew up in Germany, I guess.
Yeah, klar.
Yeah, and you know, in America, it's definitely like that. You feel like, why should I learn another language? I don't need it. You know, I get by with English. You know, I think in Germany, this is also coming. A lot of people are very good at English in Germany, but there's still this feeling. It's like, okay, for your well-being or for your career, you don't really need another language. So I think that's another big motivator besides the relationships or being in your class, is that, you know, because we have, like you as well, people from, let's say, India. You know, India is an up and coming country. There's a lot of people there actually quite well off. However, there are definitely more jobs, let's say, in computer programming on a level which is more challenging in countries like Germany or America or wherever. And then they really need that language. So I think that adds another level of motivation.
No, I totally agree. There's different reasons why people learn a language, and you use one word that I always very quickly pick up. You asked the question, why should I learn a language? And to that, I always say you shouldn't learn German at all. There is no should in learning German. If you feel you should, you're in for a lot of pain, and feel free to experience that pain. But should means you want to please someone else. And if you're into that business, then by all means experience it fully. But the should is a warning. So if you learn a language because you want to learn it, and it might be because you want to make more money, or want to meet a German partner, or you have a German Schwiegermutter, yeah, mother-in-law. You can actually try. There's a nice joke that comes to my mind. I think it's by Fitz Asmussen. So the doorbell rings and it's raining, and so the husband opens the door, says, Schwiegermutter, was machst du denn draußen im Regen? Geh doch nach Hause. So, hey, mother-in-law, what are you doing out there in the rain? Why don't you go home? It's a beautiful German humor. But so, by all means, you want to learn German. That's the truth. Nobody can force you to do it. Yeah, it's impossible to force anyone to learn a language. That's the interesting thing. And but it's such a beautiful.
You can become demotivated though. Like if you want to, but then it becomes, you know, your brain just doesn't get so frustrated, and that's where I think, you know, service, you know, like what SmarterGerman is doing, or what we're doing with Story Planet, is kind of saying, hey, you know, it's not that bad actually, and then it becomes very fulfilling. So that want isn't stamped out.
No, I totally agree. The problem is it's overwhelming because it's so much information in the beginning. And you know, and when you're young, you possibly just, it's like with babies, they learn to walk and talk through like trying 1,000 times, 10,000 times, and they don't care. It's frustrating in the moment, but then they let that go. But as adults, we tend to delve into the frustration because it's such a beautiful feeling to be frustrated. But you need help. You need help with this. Yeah, it's and seek help by all means. And that's why people go to language classes, because it promises a structure, which it does, 9 to 12, or however long you sit there. It has a book, page 1 to 20. You open next page, and that's what they do. It's structure. That's actually the key thing in the beginning, what I found, and which is what SmarterGerman is really providing, is a structure. And you do the same by having a story and putting things into context, and by allowing the user to learn vocabulary that actually matters. Yeah, at this moment, it's urgent and relevant. Urgent because you read the story, you want to know the story, and relevant because it belongs to the story, and not just exactly. you learn stuff like at the market. I don't need to know what a mango is if I've never seen one. It took me 30 years to eat my first mango.
I think what's interesting about being an app that people use on their mobile devices is that we kind of do enter into other contexts. So we are kind of outside of those structures. And I just think that's great, because I definitely think for learning any foreign language, you're not going to be able to do it just with an app. You need to have conversational situations. You need to have lots of different input from lots of different places. But then you go out into the real world, and if you're not living in that country at the time, all those impulses disappear. So I like the idea of having, oh, here's that German again, you know, here it is, it's coming, and you can spend another 10 minutes with it. It doesn't have to be more, but it becomes relevant. It becomes a part of a bigger picture.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you can do it in bite-sized pieces of the day, right? And you have 5 minutes waiting for something. Why not read a little story or a page on that? Or or do your vocabulary training, because you need to do that. But let me ask you another question. So how did you deal with difficult words? Because I know the feeling exactly that you described, that there is a word that comes again and again, and by all, like I possibly don't know that word still today. It's such a pain, but it's not important enough for me to bother to really hammer it into my brain, because I know it's only in the context of Lord of the Rings, for example. But how do you deal with difficult words? There's also words you need to learn at one point.
You mean personally, as when I'm learning?
Yeah. Or when you've learned. I'm not sure whether are you learning a language right now?
Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
And French. I mean, I've always been learning French. It's never-ending story. Another book by Michel.
Yeah, beautiful.
I mean, I just like spending time in France, and it's quite close to where I live in Germany. But I butcher the language. So difficult words.
You know the expression, pardon my French, right? It's such a beautiful expression. So you can actually say that honestly,
I mean, one thing I've been doing recently is learning this, I guess this kind of Corona lockdown phenomena, is learning all the flags of every country in the world and all the capital cities. And so this is just another way that I've been challenging my brain to learn, Nouakchott is the capital of Mauritania, which is this country wedged between Morocco and Senegal. So it's just like, exactly, but I'm learning these things, and I just thought, okay, I know it. I don't know how I learned it, but I think it was definitely through repetition. I mean, that's obviously, you're not going to be able to avoid that. Whatever you're doing, you need to do some kind of repetition. Sometimes it's just hardcore learning, but I think what's worked for me, and I think this is also documented, is creating what the Germans call an Eselsbrücke. And I couldn't even tell you what that is in English, but you just
a mnemonic device, basically.
Yeah, but it's funner than that. Eselsbrücke is nice because it itself is a kind of, it reminds me think of this donkey going over a bridge, and it's like, what does that have to do with anything?
Because it's difficult for the monkey to cross a bridge, so you have to convince him to cross it. So you have to convince your brain to take it over.
Exactly. So you just find something silly sometimes, just to sort of remind you, or think, okay, that's this word, or that's this context. So I think that's definitely something. It's something that you do find in some index card, flashcard apps, which we don't yet have in StoryPoint, but it'll be coming. But you can kind of add your own tips. Kind of say, okay, this is what I need to remember, because I keep forgetting this word. I just need to, add, like, think of the color red for some reason, just anything like that. It'll just kind of trigger in your brain.
Yeah, I'm a bit skeptical about this, adding these tips, because Memrise is doing that, or at least they used to allow you to create your own mems, which is basically the Eselsbrücke. But then you have like 20 shitty mems there, which are just noise, and you better have 1 or 2 that are really crispy and made by someone who actually knows how to do that.
Oh, sure. I mean, of course, a lot of what we do is automated. So we said, I as a learner need to choose what's relevant to me. So we don't define that for you, but we just say, okay, here are all the words that might be difficult for you. There are all the definitions, and then we create exercises automatically. So we haven't tried all of these exercises, but they're created based on certain principles.
Yeah.
And there are certain things, like with verbs, there are certain tricks that you can build into them, which are general. But I do think it's because you asked about specifically difficult words. I do think that sometimes you need a little extra personal thing that you say, okay, why is this relevant to me? And kind of add a new context to it. Again, it's all about building that puzzle piece. Like you say, it's quite intricate.
Yeah, it gets interesting a bit too when you have all these prefixes. Funny enough, the first word that comes to my mind is begräbnis. And what I would do with a word like this, it means funeral. But it's an interesting thing. Be means very often it's directed towards something, like bemalen means I'm painting onto the wall instead of malen, which is just the painting itself. And graben is to dig, like grave, grab with a B, the B is a V. So if you have these combinations and you figure that out, and of course you need some visualization, say, okay, someone is digging something and is possibly digging into a specific direction for whatever reason, and ness makes it a noun, so it's the event of digging a hole for a purpose. Yeah, and that purpose then is the funeral, is getting rid of your dead body, and it's quite something. So if you make a little story around it and you relate it to English, that also helps a lot. Yeah,
I don't think we've got that one yet, but we should. We're starting to get most vocabulary in our stories. We need to add some ones with people dying. But good idea.
Yeah, it's always good to read about death.
Part of life.
Yeah.
The greatness would be the burial.
The burial, even.
I think. Although sometimes.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Funeral. Its funeral is. Well, now that is possibly the celebration where you get this cake and coffee. I haven't taken part in one yet. Oh, that's also lovely. What is schmaus in English?
I don't know.
Let me look it up quickly.
Schmaus is like something pleasurable or indulging or
a delight, basically.
Delight,
but it's if you translate it, means that like corpse delight. It doesn't a feast.
Yeah.
So Leichenschmaus might mean the feast of the dead, but that is of the corpses. But that's a bit weird. But you're right. It's the funeral is the Beerdigung. But I'm not sure whether we differentiate that particularly, but it's nice. You can. It helps. Yeah. I would understand that ich war auf einem Begräbnis, ich war auf einer Beerdigung. I think it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
What's interesting is that normally it's the same thing, but through the pandemic, some of those things have happened differently. And sometimes you'll have literally a Todesfeier. You have something like a memorial service in Zoom. So then you do differentiate somehow.
Oh, yeah. As I said, luckily not too many people in my environment have died. Yeah.
So I think you are younger than I.
Possibly my parents are younger, and I missed my grandfather's burial, but he's still in my heart. Yeah. So, but it doesn't matter. It's lovely. These things are lovely. If you can, if you have taken part in this, then you learn the vocabulary also.
And it sticks in mind, especially Leichenschmaus. You have to actually have been to one of these, which I was. And then it's just like it's an absurd word in a way, and it kind of shows a little bit of German psychology or German humor too.
Okay, we got a bit lost there, but that's a lovely way to indeed look into words, and with some words you simply have to live with the fact that they will never land. In English there's so many words that I recognize. Ironically, I get it by the context, but I never could translate the word. Translation is not everything. That's a good thing. Yeah, you don't need to be able to translate every single word in order to fully comprehend what's going on.
That's true, but I think and I am involved in translations every now and then because I am quite fluent in both languages.
Yes, I can confirm that, by the way. We could have this discussion in German, but for your sake, viewers, we did this in English.
I think that can actually also be a helpful way to deepen your understanding of a language, because you become very, very aware of the fact that not all words can be translated. I think a really good example is the German word Sicherheit, which is has a very, very big meaning, and it can be very emotional, whereas safety is not really an emotional word. And then you have security, which is more of a military word. So the meanings of safety and security are within Sicherheit. But Sicherheit can even be bigger or kind of go into other areas. So I think when you translate, you actually then start to appreciate how each language has, its own domain.
Certainty is another word, mit Sicherheit, with certainty. Yeah, but translation is a tricky thing, because what you just said, that's definitely B2C1, C2 level, and it's gorgeous. I love language for that. If you start with a language, your translations are very basic, right? And whether you understand Gebäude, it's the word of the day, it seems, or house, whether you use Gebäude or house doesn't matter when you start. And you actually start with very big bricks, and then you start filling the gaps and then becoming finer and finer.
And it'll be different for every person, because maybe you're in a very early level, you are confronted with the situation that somebody dies. So you'll be learning words that aren't relevant for somebody else. And that's why I think it's so important at the B1 level to have things, to individualize the learning experience.
Yeah.
I don't want to learn something I already know. And I may want to fill in a certain area of my puzzle because that's relevant to me, because I'm interested in mountain climbing, so I'm going to want to learn all those mountaineering words that someone else isn't interested in.
As well. Yeah, I totally agree. There was one thought that came. Give me a second. One question I had for you.
Sicherheit.
Yeah, the translation. How did you, because translation is what we do initially. And what people sometimes ask me, or very often actually ask me, is how can I learn to think in German? Because
I love that question. I love that
question. Yeah, then go for it, because I love that as well. It's a very interesting one.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And the other question is, what language do you dream in?
Oh, that's also lovely. Yeah, I love that.
And let me start with that one, because I don't dream in any language. Now, if I'm dreaming, it could be that language will come in there. But actually, when I'm dreaming, it's a sequence of images or experiences. There isn't actually any language in there. I think that's really important, because you reach this, especially also through translating, you realize that the meanings of words is something deeper than the words themselves. So I think if you are become bilingual or trilingual or something like that, then you'll start to realize there is this meta language, which is over all of those languages, which is the real meaning, is what you actually want to say or what you actually experience, which is a no language. So I sometimes do think in German. I sometimes think in Italian, or even in French, because there's certain words, I don't know, n'est-ce pas? It's just like, it's so easy to say, isn't that so? N'est-ce pas? French knows what to say in French,
Yeah, sure. Like,
so I think
how can I support this process? So how can I stop thinking or to stop translating in my head? What is there that can be done in your point of view?
Well, I think part of it is definitely immersion and kind of going all the way into one language for a certain period of time. But then I think you need to come back, because this was also in immigration. For instance, in America, a lot of people who would come from, let's say, South America or even Europe would get to America and they're like, I'm going to speak English. I'm going to speak English, and they completely obliterate their past and their mother tongue in some cases, and they will lose it. And that's changed now. I mean, we live in an age now where multilingualism is embraced. And so I think it's more of a challenge, because it's obviously easier if everything is just one way and you don't have to think about alternative rules and domains. But I think you do need to immerse yourself a little bit in one way and not constantly be comparing or translating in your head. You kind of have to immerse yourself. But then you need to come back to your own language. And then you may actually start learning another language. Maybe it's just for a trip, and then it really becomes fun. I think it really becomes.
And how would you immerse yourself if you're not living in Germany, for example?
Well, exactly. You can watch YouTube videos. You can read things in that language. You can take a course that kind of embeds those things.
Yeah.
Have a pen pal or a chat pal or something like that. And maybe there are, I mean, I know here where I live in Germany, there's English speaking clubs, so I'm sure those things, and they're not with English speaking people, and so I'm sure that exists also in other countries, at least for major languages like German.
Depends on where you live, right? But the one thing I want to clarify for those who watch, immersion is, in my perception, vastly misunderstood, because what people, and this is what we've been talking about the description rather than the translation. So what is done in schools is that you're being taught German solely in German, which makes no sense.
In the beginning.
Yeah, even later, there's always a sense of insecurity, and that's still something to deal with, of course, because in daily life, you also have no translation. Yeah, I totally agree. But I think it's not done in a very good way. But what you say is indeed you just immerse yourself, and then you still need formal study. So immersion means exposing yourself to the language, to the real language, not to instructional language or grammar speak, which you don't need in German. Yeah, unless you want to teach in German. But of course, expose yourself, listen to as much German as you can, for example, to podcasts, or listen to audiobooks, audio plays, my favorites. Yeah,
without it being a learning experience necessarily. So you'll have your learning, structured learning, you'll have your unstructured learning where you just happen to have the radio in German in the background. I did this with French because it's really difficult to understand French. I would just listen to it, and I still do. So now I can actually kind of separate the words from each other.
Yeah.
And then there's something in between, which I think what we're doing with Story Planet, where you are kind of immersing yourself, but we're helping you out where it's difficult. Yeah, so I think you need everything.
Yeah, as I said, like it doesn't matter that much if you're higher. And Story Plan is a different thing. But trust me, in the beginning, I always thought, oh, you need a monolingual dictionary. Those were very thick dictionaries still. Back in the days, we didn't have these beautiful translators, or they cost a fortune. And I was always like, what? Like, nah, I don't get that.
When you're very, very beginning, especially as an adult, you need to use translations, definitely.
Yeah, and they have done tests with teachers who, I worked for Berlitz in the beginning, and I'm thankful for that because it provided me with a structure and an idea that I actually am good at something. But they did a test with teachers, and Berlitz teachers, and they put them in a classroom, a monolingual classroom where they only spoke German. And what they did is they looked it up on the dictionary or on the handy, and then they looked up the word. Yeah, because that's a tendency. You want to understand at least the gist of things. You don't have to look up every word. But this is the thing, and this is such a natural thing to do. We think in our native language first, and we translate first. And I always say it comes. You named it nicely with immersion. It comes with time if you invest. Yeah, if you put effort into it. Yeah, you cannot force yourself to think in a different language. I was saying I'm not thinking in English right now. I'm not even thinking in German, in English, I mean, I'm not thinking in German or translating anything, but I'm not thinking when I speak. It's unless it's so fast that it's beyond my perception, and then what does it matter? What influence do I have over what my thoughts are right now that come out of my mouth? Zero. So if you think you can control that and then force yourself to think in German, what you can do is have an inner monologue in German, whatever that looks like. The problem with that is there is no feedback. So you might just speak gibberish up there, or speaking in tongues, which is lovely, but that might not be German. And sometimes it comes out, and then you can see, well, you better speak out loud because it has the benefit of being able to correct that stuff. Yeah.
And I think it's also okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, of course.
That's a thing that we think like, oh, I want to say it right.
No.
In the beginning, you need to just do it, and people will forgive you. Especially, I think, in German-speaking countries. My experience in France with speaking rudimentary French has not always been so easy, especially in Paris. I think Germans are more accommodating. I mean, they'll appreciate that you've made an effort and that you're making an effort.
I always say you got assholes in every culture and every country. So if someone really lets you feel like makes you feel bad, it's their problem, not yours. Yeah, and that's a difficult thing it takes time to get to this attitude and also get through this emotionally, because it's a pain if you already feel insecure speaking that language and someone comes and slaps you for it. Whew. That's really a tough lesson to learn, but it's an important one. But nobody said it's going to be easy, but it's definitely worth going through this effort. Yeah, in my perception.
It's one of the reasons I just ended up learning Italian more is also because I would have like much less Italian knowledge, and I would go to Italy and be in conversations, and people would want to include me in conversations and doing things. So so that helps, because then the language becomes interesting. And I don't want to be French bashing at all, but it's individual experience too. And so I think when you're everyone who's learning German has their own story and why they're doing that. So positive experiences are definitely important.
Absolutely. And if there's a negative experience, it's important that you get through this and also have support somewhere, because it's really emotional. You're very vulnerable speaking a new language. But I have one question to you, if I may, if you're not limited in time. Yeah, maybe 10, 15 more minutes max.
Yeah.
So what people often complain about, right? So is that when they come to Berlin, for example, and they speak to people and they have basic German, people instantly hear, oh, there's an accent in there. Let me switch to English. How did you experience this as well, where you were in Switzerland or wherever you started learning German?
Well, yeah, I was learning Schweizerdeutsch,
Oh.
which is a dialect. Really interesting, but interesting in the sense that in Switzerland they learn, if you learn a German speaking Switzerland, you learn German, and
High
then
German, yeah.
you learn French as your next language, and then maybe English. So in Germany, you're learning English first as your second language. So what would happen in Switzerland is you would speak dialect and they would switch to High German, which was also annoying. But
they don't want you to butcher that beautiful dialect.
Yeah, they would understand, okay, he's not from here, and then they would switch to High German. That doesn't happen anymore. I did actually learn the dialect. But
impressive.
You do feel, yeah, you do feel like they're not giving me a chance or they don't take me seriously. You know, I mean, either it's somebody you know and it's like, no, I really want to speak German. Let's try this in German. Or like you say, you're just like, okay, don't take it personally. You know, I mean, especially Berlin is an interesting place when people have an interesting psychology. So you really can't take a lot of that too personally.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Are you based in Berlin?
I'm based in Berlin. I've been living here since the year 2001, I think. My son was born here, and that's why I got stuck here as well.
Yeah.
At least I say that. That's the reason. But yeah. But so what did you do with this? So how did you get over that? By just not taking it personally and just keep trying, or what was the solution for you?
Well, definitely in family or friend situations, I would just say, please let's stick to German. I would say that. And then, yeah, I think you can ask. I mean, maybe if you're in a shop and it's not such an important situation, you can just, accept that they're switching to English. Or you just say, bitte sagen Sie das auf Deutsch, oder sprechen wir bitte Deutsch. I think you can ask that, and people will appreciate that.
Oh, you can ask everything. You can just expect that they follow that, right? So what I always say is you can force anyone to speak German with you because for whatever reason they don't want to. It might be a good reason because they want to help you. And you see, communication, the first purpose of communication is to communicate, to connect. And if I feel it's easier to connect with you in English, then I switch to English. It's nothing bad about that. I'm not your teacher, so unless you pay me, yeah. And so if you make the offer, hey, teach me German by talking German with me, at least, then that's the thing I can reject or I can take on. But nobody can force you either to speak English to them. So you could consistently speak German to the people, even though they spoke back in English. And that's also legit. It's a way to go. You need to practice more. And the moment you actually reach a certain level of precision and fluency, it doesn't have to be perfect, then people actually don't switch anymore. Yeah, there's a moment where it really clicks and people are able to have a conversation for longer. It's always 5 minutes longer, 10 minutes longer. Sometimes you will have 2 hours of conversation. At one point, like me, you would speak all day English and it feels as natural as German. Yeah, even though it's not, of course. But so it's not easy, but people are people, and then once you realize that, why try to change things that can't be changed?
Well, I think if you're learning German and you're not in Germany, you really have to be very, very conscious of that. But if you are living in Germany, I mean, I have definitely a lot of friends who are not German for different reasons. But I also have a lot of friends who are German, and sometimes you'll just go in like a hiking group, or you look for something, a situation where there's probably going to be more Germans, or it's more of a German context, and that's where you learn German. I mean, I just got to the point where I didn't want to lose my English, and that's another thing. Okay, this is a first world problem, I guess. Just not the problem of people who are just learning German, but I really had to say, okay, I need to actually also have context where I will reach. And I've read almost exclusively in German for a long time. Read Die Zeit, very just complicated German newspaper, and read Kant and Nietzsche. Actually, great way to put yourself to sleep at night. But then I had to realize, oh, I'm losing my English, and I work with English as professionally. So that's when, I had to kind of balance both of them. So that's why, I think immersion is in that sense, once you get to the higher levels, is going to help you break through those barriers to when you're then speaking with people, they will just accept that you understand everything that they say, and won't feel like, oh, is he understanding me?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's also highly unpleasant if I talk to you, for example, and I get the feeling, oh, maybe he doesn't get the main points, then I feel uneasy, and then I actually switch to a language that you clearly understand. And that's so. It's not always that people don't want to help you, right? It's really because they very likely want to connect to you, and what to do about it, right? But yeah, very, very interesting. So let's wrap this up slowly. It was a lovely conversation, by the way, much longer than I actually expected, but so many beautiful things came up. If you had a formal tip, if you had one tip or two for every beginning German learner, and maybe also one for one who crosses over to B2, what would that be? What helped you? What is very helpful when you're beginning with German or when you cross over to B2?
Have fun.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that it's fun. It's not work. It's not it's fun. And I have a funny anecdote. Is my parents actually met. I mean, I have Swedish descent, but my parents met in German class at university. So this must have been, just after the war. So they thought, oh, they're interested in learning that language. And actually, my German teacher at high school was an Austrian spy. It's like, it was interesting, it's like, what happened? What is that culture that was so important? And then this horrible thing happened, and now it's coming back, in beautiful ways. So they met there, and then they would speak German to our dog, and they always spoke in the Z form. So I learned first German I learned was, kommen Sie, sitzen Sie. That's not 100% correct, but still, I would learn these things. Bleiben Sie. I would learn these things, and it was just kind of fun, and we kind of integrated in our language. And I think as you go on any beginner, that's important, and probably also for B2. Although I think once you get to that higher level, I think then my advice would be you do have to turn off your brain and just kind of do the immersion thing, I think. Yeah, and whether that's like, booking a trip and just hanging out. I mean, Berlin is an amazing city. I love to go there. There's just so much you can find anything there. So whatever your interests are, or your interests are mountaineering, there are some great mountains in German-speaking Europe. Go there and spend a couple of weeks there. And then you'll notice a real breakthrough, I think.
Thank you for that. I can just nick it off. Yeah, we say, or how do you nod it off? Do you have a word for abnicken?
Approve. I mean, in this context.
Yeah, approve by nodding. We say abnicken is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can check things off a list, but you were saying that you're agreeing, basically.
Yeah.
There might be a colloquialism for that, but
but these things you pick up out of context. Yeah. The moment it's bitte einmal abnicken. So it's schön. David, by the way, if you're of Swedish descent, do you speak Swedish?
No, because in Sweden, it's I have great friends in Sweden. They all speak perfect English. So I would have made a very, very conscious effort to learn it. I do know how to say I'm hungry or whatever important in any language. But unfortunately, I didn't. But one of my best friends who lives in Stockholm, I did go and look up some of our ancestors who live quite far north, not in the Arctic Circle yet, but Lapland. And their English wasn't so great. And so we actually had to sit there a whole afternoon trying to, to have a conversation that was difficult. So, I think in those situations, especially Americans, I know that your roots are so important to you. If you are doing that, my cousin then, after I had been to our relatives there, she wanted to go. And then this motivated her then to say, okay, I do want to learn basics in that language.
Yeah. Yeah, but even then, there's still so much more that, yeah, with the basics you get only so far. So if you really want to get in touch with someone, you have to go much further.
Sure.
It really makes, I want to say, it really makes a difference to be able to speak the language of the people you hang out with for a longer time. Yeah, let's say family, friends,
and I don't know if I mentioned that before, but there's you really get into. You talked about thinking in German, or thinking in English. I think sometimes I consciously then do think in German, and I think differently. I have different thoughts than if I'm thinking in English. And so sometimes it's really fun, actually, again, getting back to fun, to realize that I am me, I'm still myself, but I will think differently or express myself differently. If we had this whole same conversation in German, I would say different things because they would come out differently.
It's an interesting, I've heard that before. I'm thinking whether I actually do that, because I can't say, I really can't say, because in my perception, I'm who I am, no matter what language I speak. But I see where you go to, where you come from.
You're always who you are, but what you realize is that you can think in different ways, and that's very satisfying and very liberating. Is that you can, because German is a little bit more of an objectified language, so you can kind of think somehow in a more structured way.
I know what you mean, and I even read something about it years back, and I cannot find that article for the life of me again, where people were English-speaking people and German-speaking people were looking at an image where people were leaving a factory. And some people were really indeed talking about, it's end of work and there's a factory and there's a gate and there's people. And others say people are coming and they were doing things and they were more process-oriented than the others. But I don't know who was what. As you say, German is more objectified. I assume that the Germans were rather focused on describing what is on the picture instead of what is happening there. But I found that very interesting at that time. It was during my studies. So there is, of course, I agree with what you say. I'm just thinking whether I actually can perceive that in my world, but I struggle with that. Interesting. I will pay attention to it next time I speak German. Yeah.
Most of my multilingual friends, and we notice that, but it's enriching because it allows you to really have a deeper understanding of yourself or of the world, because you can see it through other eyes.
Yeah, fascinating, spannend, actually, spannend, exciting. Good. I think there was another, but there's so many questions that pop up when you say these things. Let's wrap it up here.
Okay.
And yeah, call it a day. But I'm happy to repeat this in one form or the other again. And I'll add a link to Story Planet under the video, of course. Yeah, and just for everyone to check out whether they like it or not. It currently doesn't come with audio, but you promised, yeah, carefully that one day there will be audio. And that would make it actually even
of course
better.
I know that is the number one thing people are asking for, and we actually have the audio for many of the stories, but we're doing
I know
we're startup, we have to do one thing at a time, and we also have we're commissioned to do projects for publishers or for schools.
No, I feel no need to explain anything. I personally at least understand one thing after another or everything at once, but just to give a little outlook in that this beautiful tool is still under development.
It'll just get better and better.
Yeah, and that's what I like, and that's also why we're talking, right? Because I got a good feeling with this as well, and love to see that. I hope that all of you who watched this little chat between David and me will actually enjoy that. David has the heart, and his team, they have the heart at the right place, which is what I really, really love. And because that's what we need more. Yeah, it's like David said, enjoy. It's about joy. And in the end, you need to love what you do. Not all the time, but at least there needs to be enough of it to keep going, because it's a long-term engagement, right? Yeah. May I ask one last question now? Sorry, but how long did it take you to be fluent? So I know there's maybe not a very clear date when you realized, I can do this now without thinking or without worrying. What would you say? How long did it take you to become fluent in German?
I think there are different levels. I think, just having learned at high school with our Austrian spy teacher, I didn't learn much. You don't learn much at school. It's like 2 or 3 hours a week, you know, and
yeah, you only learn Hände hoch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you know, having done the exchange year, all of the exchanges, we went through the same experience that in the first 3 months, you're simply desperate because it's just too much. And you're just, but then this magic moment comes, and it comes normally after 3 months of being immersed in that country. You know, it goes like that. And then all of a sudden you're not fluent, but you feel like you can actually just not have to have a headache all the time. Like it starts to come, it starts to flow. And then I think, and then maybe this idea of fluency, it's very evasive. You know, I think even in English, I discover new words that I didn't know before, depending on the context. I think fluency, again, if you're in the country, it's going to be faster. Definitely. And well, I had to learn German again because I came to Germany after being in Switzerland.
Yeah, it's definitely different. We have subtitles for the Swiss people.
Yeah.
But
so I think having been in the country and really sticking to it, I'm trying to think about Italian because I've been learning that longer, but not as immersed. 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, but there's stages, right? So as you say, I experienced that in Poland when I went there to learn Polish. So it's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. There's always somehow stages. There's not a precise day or date. But there's one thing I want to be more precise with, and you say immersion helps. Immersion can help if done right. Because it doesn't mean you come to Berlin, for example, or you come to Germany that you automatically speak German. If you don't go out there and actually use the language or actually speak to people that speak German, you can be living in Germany and not hear a single word of German, yeah, or not that much.
Yeah, especially in Berlin, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really difficult to, it's a little bit of force necessary, or, you know, you need to be a little bit extrovert to an extent, even though that might not be your nature, yeah?
Well, I'm actually not an extrovert. So I think no, I mean, immersion is not the answer to everything, but it's just one way of, you know, you have to build it up. You have to build up a vocabulary. You have to get a sense of, you know, grammar or whatever. But then these are the moments where you get the satisfaction. Where like, oh, I actually am having a conversation.
Yeah.
And you feel like, okay, this is really cool.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
You have to be intentional about that. And if you are an extrovert, then maybe you go to the parties. You know, if you're more like me, you prefer one-on-one conversations, then you have to find a different, you know, you fall in love with someone and you say, okay, let's just speak this language, you know.
That's the easiest way.
Yeah.
If I had a recipe of how to fall in love with someone, I'd be fine, you know. But yeah, it's you know, but that, just to sum it up, this is the whole beauty of it as well. There is mystery to it. There's also something you cannot control. You cannot make happen. It will happen if you just let it happen. Yeah, learning a language is nothing. It's not like a machine. That's why the machine is not there yet. They do a good job assisting, but they are far from replacing a translator or someone who communicates. Yeah.
And I think because there now are translator apps. I mean, I've been traveling in China where I don't speak a word beyond ni hao or shishi. It's all with apps. You know, you just speak into the app and you have a conversation via the apps. Yeah, sure. But on a human level, and really getting into that mindset, and really, you know, that real connection, that only happens when you speak the language.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and those are beautiful final words. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, David, for taking the time and for sharing your beautiful thoughts and experiences. And yeah, I hope that Story Planet evolves and grows and becomes even more successful, and that we too also will stay in touch for a longer time and see what comes out of this. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Have a lovely day. Yeah. And goodbye to all of you.
Mach weiter.
Yeah, genau. Yeah, heads up and keep going. It's only going to get better and more enjoyable. Okay. Bye.
Ciao. Ciao.